If you want to hear about the hidden text on the computer screens and 14 never before revealed things you missed in Glass, then stick around to the end of this video. The first scene shows the birth of Elijah Price, and we first see the child who would later become known as Mr. Glass, through the reflection of a glass mirror. This is a common theme in Unbreakable. We're introduced to age 13 Elijah through the reflection of the glass television screen, and we're introduced to adult Elijah through the reflection of the glass in one of his pieces at the art gallery. When David meets Elijah for the first time, not only are we looking through a glass window, but the characters are framed in a box just like a comic book.
We're by appointment only.
I got a card from this store.
The reason for these choices is that Elijah sees himself as nothing more than a fragile, broken piece of glass, and his entire purpose throughout the film is to find his real place in the world and discover why he is the way he is. In the next scene, we're introduced to the protagonist, David Dunn. Note the alliteration of his name, like many other superheroes: Clark Kent, Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, and several others. One of the first moments of David being on screen has him looking at a child in the seat in front of him, who is upside down. Like the recurrent theme of glass, inversion is also something that's seen time and time again in Unbreakable. And to understand it, it's important to understand the connection between the film's two central characters. David and Elijah are opposites in every way but one. One is invincible, and the other is as fragile as they come. One gets sick very easily, the other is never sick. One is physically gifted, the other has a hard time even getting around. David is light-skinned, Elijah has dark skin. David is very reserved, while Elijah is quite outgoing. And of course, David is the hero, while Elijah is the villain. So when all is right with the world, the camera is upright, as it should be. But when disaster is about to strike, when something bad is about to happen, the camera is inverted in relation to its subject. The upside-down girl precedes the train crash, David's son Joseph watches TV upside down before learning of the crash, Elijah lays eyes on the comic book that first gives him the idea that he's supposed to be a supervillain, and it's upside down. Elijah falls down the stairs and sees the man with the gun get away with an inverted perspective, and Joseph sees his dad lift an impossible amount of weight from upside down, which later leads him to pull a gun on his father. There's also an inversion reference hidden in the credits. David's wife is named Audrey Dunn, but there's a separate credit for the actress who played the age 20 Audrey before her and David were married, where she's referred to as Audrey in verso. Finally, Elijah discovers the comic that helps him find out what David's kryptonite is, and that's upside down as well. And speaking of that kryptonite, that one weakness that David has, David tells Kelly, the woman on the train, that he's thinking about getting into male synchronized swimming. Which is funny because we later find out that his weakness is water. Director M Night Shyamalan also used the idea of water as a weakness in his next film, Signs. There's also a connection to his previous film, The Sixth Sense, in that Bruce Willis is the star of both movies. David's wife also mentions that her favorite song is Soft and Wet by the artist formerly known as Prince. Another word for soft is weak, and David becomes weaker whenever he gets wet. Kelly also asks David if he likes football, and he says, not really. We later find out this is a lie. David was a huge football star, and he still works as a security guard at his former school's stadium, so that he can continue to be around the game. Kelly is going to Philadelphia to meet with a cornerback from Temple University, who later appears in the movie. He's in the park playing football with a bunch of kids, one of which is David's son. Alright, always good to be back. So where were we? After the accident, Joseph is seen watching television.
I don't know how close they're going to be able to get, David. These are woods and trees. It's going to be a very difficult rescue effort.
It starts with this Dole commercial featuring a skateboarding banana. Then he flips the channel to Jerry Springer, then the Powerpuff Girls, which is a 90s superhero cartoon, and then an episode of I Am Weasel, another 90s cartoon. This episode's about a smart banana that comes to life, and it's actually a really funny episode. I'm not entirely sure why there are two separate references to a living, sentient banana, perhaps an early foreshadowing of the Horde, whose defining color is yellow, or perhaps something to do with banana splits? Could be something there. I should also probably explain the color scheme for anyone who hasn't seen my Glass trailer analysis. David is almost always wearing green, from his shirt in scene 2 to his iconic rain poncho. Elijah can mostly be found wearing purple, and the present from his mother is wrapped in purple. It even goes right down to Elijah's purple walled office in David's kitchen with the green cabinets, which looks beautiful when complemented by the orange accents after David defeats the Orange Man. Oh man, we could talk about color theory all day with this movie. But let's switch back to wherever we were. Right, the TV. The news of the train wreck comes in on Channel 4 News, whose logo resembles the logo of the Marvel superhero group, the Fantastic Four. So David ends up being the only survivor of the train crash, and after the memorial, receives a note from Elijah, which leads him to discover that he's never actually been sick. Then, as we previously mentioned, the flashback to Elijah's childhood where he receives the gift from his mother, a comic book titled The Battle with Jaguaro. Jaguaro is a beast-like antagonist wearing yellow and a reference to the Beast from Split. Jaguaro is going up against a superhero wearing green, obviously a reference to David.
They say this one has a surprise ending.
Yes, it does. Elijah tries to sell the original artwork as an adult, calling it a classic depiction of good versus evil. However, when he learns that the buyer wants to get this as a present for his kid, Elijah is outraged. And I love that little moment where Elijah's explaining that this is an art gallery, not a toy store. And then he asks the prospective buyer, "Do you see any Teletubbies in here?" And the guy actually looks like, oh my god, there's no Teletubbies in here. But anyway, after David meets Elijah and thinks that he's a scam artist, which is interesting in itself considering David's innate ability to sense evil, David goes home and reads the newspaper article about the train crash of Eastrail 177. The photo of the wreck is credited to Kevin Ladson, and he's actually the prop master of the movie. In the article, the name of the transportation secretary is Kia Dickerson, who's also on the art department of Unbreakable. Part of the article mentions that the trains had just had an engine check prior to leaving the station, an early hint that foul play was involved. On the right column, there's an article about raising money to build prisons. For you and me to live in! Excuse me, to house the number of inmates expected in the next decade. Perhaps some of the criminals caught by David Dunn will inhabit these prisons. Then David takes a look back at the newspaper highlights from his football career. One of the articles is written by Scott Murphy, Shyamalan's assistant art director, and the photographer, Jim Fang, is a reference to James Fang, another assistant art director. Here's another reason I love this movie. Always good to see the Brewers losing. The article about David's car crash in college is written by Robert Holtzman, yet another assistant set decorator. He's interrupted from reliving his glory days when his wife comes knocking on his door, asking if David has been with anyone since they started having problems.
I'm prepared for any answer, and it won't affect me.
She's lying.
The answer won't affect me.
She's lying.
It won't affect me either way.
She's lying.
No.
Told you. The next day at work, Elijah shows up, and we're introduced to David's ability to sense bad people in the crowd when he predicts that a man wearing camouflage is carrying a silver weapon with a black grip, and that he will step out of line, which he does. Elijah sets out to see if David's prediction is correct. He steps out of his car, which is completely covered in padding, in order to pursue the guy, but on the stairs to the subway, he has a bad fall, and the shattering of his glass cane represents his frailty. I already talked about these scenes, so let's move on to the next stadium scene. A single mother in red bumps into him, and he hears the sounds of child abuse. Roll it like the Spirit of Philadelphia. Maybe, just maybe, this kid is a young Kevin Wendell Crumb from Split, but it might be impossible to know for sure. It is a different actress playing the mom, but it has been 15 years, so it's just possible that they weren't able to get that woman who was an extra on set back to play the mom. I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts on that are in the comments, though. Then there's a cameo from the director M Night Shyamalan himself. David is called away from work because his son Joseph has an injury at school when he gets in a fight with two kids, who we later find out are Potter and some other guy.
It was Potter and another guy. They were messing with this Chinese girl in the dressing room.
You may remember Potter is the cousin of the cornerback from Temple.
He's Potter's cousin. He's starting cornerback at Temple University.
And then we've got Joseph's gun scene. Now, supposedly this was inspired by an incident that really happened to Superman actor George Reeves, where a child confronted him with a gun and asked to shoot him to prove that Superman was invincible. And Reeves convinced him to put the gun down by telling him that someone might be injured by the ricochet. I don't know if that story is true, but either way, it could have been used as an inspiration for the Unbreakable scene. Finally, David revisits the wrecked train cars and remembers the incident he and Audrey went through in college, where he was actually completely unharmed in the car accident. He decides to become a vigilante and saves the two kids from the Orange Man. In the newspaper article that comes out the next day, we find out that the kids were tied up like that for 3 days. The author of the article is Nicole Marcella, of course, an art department assistant. Scott Murphy, the sports writer from before, also has something to say about the breakup of farmland in this other article. So this man has many passions, it seems, and the farmland stuff could be another hint towards Signs being Shyamalan's next film. Finally, David visits Elijah's art gallery showing and meets his mother.
See the villain's eyes? They're larger than the other characters. They insinuate a slightly skewed perspective on how they see the world.
These are just a couple of final clues towards the reveal that's about to happen in a couple minutes. Elijah has always seen the world from a skewed perspective through those big eyes of his, but what's truly amazing is her next comment.
But he says there's always two kinds. There's the soldier villain, who fights the hero with his hands. And then there's the real threat, the brilliant and evil arch-enemy, who fights the hero with his mind.
Shyamalan was planning to bring the Horde from Split into the equation from the very beginning. In fact, he would later reveal that the Horde was at one point supposed to be a part of Unbreakable, but he cut the character and saved him for Split because the movie was getting too crowded. The final freeze frame of the movie states that Elijah Price is in an institution for the criminally insane. Why would it say that if this is not a true story and Shyamalan wasn't planning on having Glass take place in that institution 19 years later? Both Split and Unbreakable open with a birthday scene. In Unbreakable, it was the birth of Elijah Price, and in Split, Claire Benoit celebrates her birthday. At the end of the party, her dad offers a ride to her classmate, Casey Cooke, but he never quite makes it into the car. Last week, I described how David Dunn and Elijah Price are color-coded, with David being associated with green and Elijah being purple. The Horde has their own color too, yellow. It can be seen in Dennis's handkerchief, Hedwig's jacket, the flowers placed around the holding room and at the train station, the lighting and wall colors throughout the area below maintenance, as well as the tiles above ground at the zoo. In the poster for Glass, the colors for each character are made clear. There are 24 sets of titles in the opening and closing credits of Split, one for each of the 24 identities of the Horde. The opening credits also have letters connected by a vertical line in a way that makes it look like two entries on a timeline, just as this is the second entry in the series. The accompanying music by Wes Dylan Thordson sounds like distorted animal cries. Take a listen. So the girls are kidnapped and put in this holding room. Claire and Marcia have different ideas about how to get out than Casey, and the room is vertically split, just like the title of the movie, by this power line to show the divide. Vertical divisions of the frame are also a technique used a lot in Alfred Hitchcock's horror classic, Psycho. M Night Shyamalan, the director of Split, lists Hitchcock as a huge influence. He even released a 10-minute video on his appreciation of Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. There are other Psycho references in Split, but we'll get to them when we get to them. Casey tells Marcia to pee herself when Dennis takes her out of the room, hoping to prevent Dennis from forcing her to do something that she doesn't want to do. The fact that Dennis is a germaphobe works in her favor, but really, that was just luck. Around this time, one of the other identities, Barry, reaches out to their psychologist, Dr. Fletcher. She's got several other emails on the screen. Just as the art department of Unbreakable had cameos in the newspaper, the crew of Split makes cameos in Dr. Fletcher's email. Charles S. Rowe is credited as a miscellaneous crew member, John B. West, Dominic Catanzarite, and John Rusk were part of the production department. Mitch Campbell, Lucas Andre, Jennifer Wessner, Ed Mendez, and Bob Lowery all worked visual effects. Skip Leovesay, Brian Baker, Adam Leach, and Matthew Shapiro were part of the post-production team, and Lisa Liberati is James McAvoy's girlfriend. One of the emails mentions Cézanne, the French painter, and we'll come back to that later. I love all these movies with just disturbing pictures in the background. Anyway, Barry comes to see Dr. Fletcher, but it's not really Barry. Dr. Fletcher asks if he's looking for something, but he's actually putting the room back in order because it's really Dennis, the guy with OCD. Imagine having a disorder within your disorder. Maybe Mr. Glass can relate.
I have something called osteogenesis imperfecta. It's a genetic disorder.
My name is Dr. Ellie Staple, and I'm a psychiatrist. I specialize in those individuals who believe they are superheroes.
Anyway, the supposed Barry talks about making a jacket with hand-printed newspaper headlines.
It's supposed to be like a tailored jacket, but I'm gonna hand print it with newspaper headlines.
I know someone who happens to have a collection of newspaper headlines. Also, in Dr. Fletcher's office, there's a picture on the wall of what appears to be a woman looking behind a shower curtain. This is one of those Psycho references I was talking about. After Dennis leaves, Dr. Fletcher goes through her patient files. The only one that's legible is this one on a Mr. Douglas Luttrell, and as far as I can tell, the name is not relevant. But the dates on the file range from July 2000 to November 2000. November 2000 is when Unbreakable was released, and most of the movie is set within these dates. For example, the encounter with the Orange Man in Unbreakable takes place just before October 23rd, 2000. She also has a bin labeled Universal Offices. You can probably guess who produced this movie. Dr. Fletcher visits an art gallery to view this Cezanne painting, probably the one she received the email about earlier. This piece is called The Bathers. Would it be too much of a stretch to relate this to David Dunn's swimming pool accident or fear of water? If your answer is yes, that is too much of a stretch, then fine. But there's no denying this line from Dr. Fletcher's associate, Joe, was an intentional clue.
You speak of them like they're supernaturally gifted, like they have powers or something. Karen, these are patients. They have been through trauma.
Whoa, that's a good one. I'm curious if any of you picked up on that the first time through, and at what point did you actually realize this was a sequel? I tried to look for some more clues in Dr. Fletcher's notes on the various identities, but I couldn't really make out anything. I don't know if this was supposed to be a joke on that whole trope about doctors having bad handwriting, but I can't read any of it. So let's go back to Casey and the girls. Casey awakes from a flashback, and we see her point of view, which is sideways. When I talked about Unbreakable, I examined the right side up versus upside down shots in that movie, so maybe these sideways shots in Split are a little bit of an in-between. This is also one of the first times we get a good peek out of the holding room, and there's a container of Barnum animal crackers, one of the earliest clues towards their location being the Philadelphia Zoo.
It took forever to get this place safe without the nosy bodies that work here finding out you can't get out of here.
Back at Dr. Fletcher's office, we've got our M Night cameo in the form of this guy, who helps Dr. Fletcher review security footage of Dennis deliberately trying to prove that he's Barry by walking through the trash. When Patricia brings Casey and Marcia into the kitchen, you can briefly see that they all have different cereal preferences, which I found to be an interesting detail. One of the things I talked about in Unbreakable is how we always see Elijah through a glass reflection to represent the fragile nature of his disorder. We see Elijah through the reflection each time he's introduced at a new age. In Split, we see Dennis in the reflection of this certificate just before he first introduces himself to Dr. Fletcher. There's another reflection scene later on, which I'll come back to. But in this conversation, we find out that the 24th identity, the Beast, resides away from the other 23 identities in a train yard. Because Kevin's dad left on a train when he was young, presumably that was Eastrail 177. Casey convinces Hedwig to show her his room, which, in another clue about them being under the zoo, is filled with animal posters and toys. Additionally, the song that he famously dances to in his room is called Frog Bass by the artist currently known as Snails. And this is actually a pretty good drawing of Reshiram, if that's what that's supposed to be. Hedwig shows Casey the walkie-talkie that he stole from Dennis, and Casey uses it to try to call for help. But the man on the other end just thinks that it's his friend pulling his leg and assures him that he still has the orange headphones. When Casey eventually does get out at the end of the movie, we do see him listening to those orange headphones before he calls the police. But before any of that, there's a very important flashback to where a young Casey holds her abusive uncle at gunpoint, in a scene that's very, very reminiscent of Joseph holding David at gunpoint in Unbreakable. Roll it.
Listen to what your mother...
This isn't funny.
Joseph, what the hell are you doing?
Is it loaded?
Joseph, did you load that gun?
Casey?
Joseph.
I'm your uncle.
No, I am your father.
Stop it, Casey.
Joseph!
Put that gun down.
And I am telling you to put that gun down right now!
I'm getting upset. I'm about to get very angry.
You are about to be in big trouble!
There it is.
Who?
Could kill me.
These scenes take place at almost the exact same point in both movies. Maybe one day I'll do a side-by-side comparison, but that sounds like another video. Dr. Fletcher's concern leads her to try to talk to the Horde at his home, so she pulls up in a taxi. Remember how the Channel 4 news logo in Unbreakable was very reminiscent of the Fantastic Four logo? Well, the letter T in this taxi cab service is also a reference to the Teen Titans logo. The pieces are all coming together, as Dennis visits the train station to transform into the Beast, and it's an Amtrak train, just like Eastrail 177. Casey explores the Horde's computer, and this is where we see the video diaries of each member. One of them is named Norma, which completes the trifecta of Psycho references, this one referencing Norma Bates. At some point, Dr. Fletcher realizes she probably won't make it out alive, but she leaves a note for the captive girls to find. The note is written on a receipt from Hagenbaugh Laboratories, which is not a thing. But Emily Hagenbaugh is the author of this superhero book. So you know how the rest goes. Casey has her confrontation with the Beast. The Beast sees that she too has gone through some abuse and lets her live. Someone finds her and escorts her from below the maintenance area, and the orange headphones guy calls the police. One of the most disturbing things to me is that even after all that Casey has been through, she still doesn't want to go back with her uncle at the end. That's how bad he is. But there's one more loose end that still hasn't been tied up on my end. I mentioned the Unbreakable reference where we see the Horde in the reflection of Dr. Fletcher's office, just like those Elijah Price scenes in the first movie. The final scene with the Horde goes all in on this, and includes the panning back and forth camera movement as seen in many of the scenes in Unbreakable. All the while, James Newton Howard's Unbreakable soundtrack slowly transitions in as we cut to the credits and the iconic in-credit scene and the reveal of David Dunn. I've got goosebumps just thinking about it. Now the stage is set for Glass, and I could not be more excited. Glass begins with 4 cheerleaders being abducted by Hedwig, and David Dunn, who is starting to become known as the Overseer, shifting his focus from petty criminals to the Horde. We first see him take out these kids who are filming themselves Superman punching a random guy in the street to try to go viral. These low criminals are pretending to be superheroes online, which provides a stark contrast with the ending of Glass, where real superheroes leak on social media. When David first enters the house, he runs water from the faucet, a strange choice considering water is his only weakness.
Yo, who's there?
David now has his own security company, Dunn Home Security. Elijah says in Unbreakable that David works in security for a reason because he's a born protector, so it makes sense that he gets his own company.
You could have been a tax accountant, you could have owned your own gym, you could have opened a chain of restaurants, you could have done one of 10,000 things, but in the end, you chose to protect people. You made that decision, and I find that very, very interesting.
Joseph keeps a list of quotes said by the criminals David has taken out. At the bottom of the notebook, one says, "Get ready to get on the pain train." David first discovers his powers by surviving a train wreck. The one Joseph writes down about how he's gonna Salt Bae him is a reference to this meme. If anyone was wondering, these Twitter accounts look like they were created for the movie, then stripped of all their content, or possibly created after the fact to prevent anyone from pretending to be associated with the movie. The Reddit page that Joseph finds the Overseer article on also has a link at the bottom, reading, "We dead yet?" This may be a clue about the ending of the movie. The Philly Crime Time website doesn't actually exist. In fact, there's not even a .com in this URL. One of the suggested articles on the side says, "Local citizen sees and stops assault. Says Tiptoe Man inspired him to act." And then, in the 4 More Teens Abducted article, it says, "Some legal experts are even arguing that one personality cannot be held accountable for the actions of another, hinting at many legal obstacles ahead if the man is ever apprehended." The next day at work, M. Night Shyamalan, the director of the Trilogy, makes his cameo appearance, and it answers one of the questions I had going into the movie. He mentions that he's getting more cameras because one of his tenants was killed off-site. He's talking about Dr. Fletcher. So it seems that Jay from Split wasn't just an IT guy helping Dr. Fletcher review security footage, but actually her landlord. And probably also her landlord.
You can't use your thumbs to spin the wheel, dumb.
Jay goes on to see David, and he recognizes him as the security guard from all those years ago, and tells him that he used to hang out with the shady types at the stadium, but he turned his life around. This confirms that stadium drug dealer and Jay are in fact the same character. But this is more than just a fun little director's cameo. It shows the effect that David had cleaning up crime around his city. He actually had a positive impact on the community and helped turn shady people into functioning members of society. David goes out again to look for the Horde, with Joseph giving him tips via headphones and GPS tracker. Not only is this a common superhero trope, but it's also a concept that Shyamalan used in his 2013 film After Earth, although in that movie the roles were reversed and it was the father giving advice to his son. After David bumps into Hedwig on the street, he heads towards the brick factory to look for the girls, and the word allies is written in graffiti on a window in the background, foreshadowing the teaming up of Elijah and the Horde.
That sounds like the bad guys teaming up.
The comic that Dr. Staple is looking at the very end is also called Supervillain Team Up. There are also huge letters spelling end, possibly because of the twist endings to each movie. I also saw it says Bender, which reminded me of that Futurama episode where Bender and Flexo get a job in a factory. When David is taken into Ravenhill Memorial, the text on the top right corner of the security camera view says H2O, because David's weakness is water and he's about to be surrounded by it. In the Unbreakable Things You Missed, I discussed how upside down camera composition was used to foreshadow bad things happening, and the trend seems to continue in Glass. When David has the confrontation with the Beast, we see the Beast's point of view as he crawls along the ceiling towards David and the rescued cheerleaders. Like many supervillains, the Beast has a signature move, which is fittingly a giant bear hug. This is the same attack he used on Dr. Fletcher during Split, on David during the factory fight, and the Orderly when him and Mr. Glass are escaping. Throughout the series, broken glass is used as a metaphor of the well-being of the characters. So when David and the Beast battle sends them out the factory through a shattering glass window, it spells the beginning of the end for them because it leads to their capture and placement in Ravenhill Memorial. Once we arrive at that institution, there's a huge clue about the final twist of the movie. As they're placed in their rooms, we are shown the point of view of the cameras placed around the institution. The entire movie, these security camera shots are constantly being shown. The final twist is dangled in front of us all along. The characters are introduced to their new psychiatrist, Dr. Ellie Staple. At the end of the movie, we find out that Dr. Staple is part of an ancient organization created to suppress superheroes from the public. When that happens, she tells Mr. Glass that they don't take sides, she's not good or evil, she essentially falls in the middle. In a literal comic book, there are staples placed in the middle crease to hold everything together. Her name represents her neutrality. The secret organization is also something that Mr. Glass knows about way back in Unbreakable.
That's where this group, the Coalition of Evil, tried to ascertain the weakness of every superhero because they all have one.
They got it wrong in the comics. They talk about secret evil groups trying to stop the heroes. I don't think we are particularly evil, and we don't choose sides.
Casey gets word of the Beast's capture when she's pulled aside at school, and we also see that she attended the same school as Joseph Dunn. I'm not entirely sure what the point of that was outside of furthering the idea that everything is connected in a comic book story, much like how David and Clarence W. Crumb were on the same train. Which, as a quick side note, Clarence's name continues the theme of alliteration in the first two movies, with characters like David Dunn, Casey Cooke, Kevin Crumb, and now Clarence Crumb. There's also a character I noticed in the IMDb credits called Scarlet Shields. I honestly have no idea who that even is. I'm assuming she's a minor character, but basically every other minor character has a name like Hospital Patient or Cheerleading Girl Number 4. I honestly have no idea who this is supposed to be. Maybe she was just given a name to throw people off trying to look up information online before the movie came out. David's son Joseph meets with Dr. Staple to try to convince her to let David go free. When he is unsuccessful, the camera tilts down to an upside down position again to watch Joseph leave the facility. Just as Joseph saw the original train crash footage upside down on the couch in Unbreakable, this camera movement in Glass also represents impending disaster. And speaking of Unbreakable, when I saw the scene of David coming into a young Joseph's room, I was completely blown away by it, because I somehow had no idea that these deleted scenes from the first film existed. And this one works really well considering the themes of Glass. Let's roll it.
I'm not scared.
That's great.
You know why? I know now.
Know what?
Your secret identity.
So Joseph felt uneasy about the fact that his father has these incredible abilities that can't be explained, but finds comfort in knowing that he has someone to protect him. This helps explain why it was so important for Mr. Glass to outsmart the Black Clover Society and broadcast the existence of superheroes out to the world.
Next, Casey is given the opportunity to meet with the Horde and discovers that her touch can bring Kevin forward into the light. My theory as to why Casey has this ability relates to the fact that the additional identities were created by Kevin's brain as a coping mechanism for the abuse dished out by his mother. It's stated in Split that the Horde exists to protect Kevin.
Are you in charge?
Yeah, we've taken charge. We're the only ones that can protect Kevin.
We're all here to protect Kevin.
He's very weak.
So naturally, the way to bring down these protections is with love and kindness. Casey is the only one who's capable of this because she too has been abused by her uncle, so she knows what kind of gentle hand is needed to undo the damage. When Casey leaves the institution after that, she puts on the jacket given to her by the man working at the Philadelphia Zoo, who helps escort her out of danger at the end of Split. My guess is that she still wears that jacket as a reminder of how she stood up to the beast, something that also gave her the strength to stand up to her uncle and just be a stronger, braver person overall. In the final examination scene, Dr. Staple tries to convince Mr. Glass, the Horde, and the Overseer that they don't actually have superpowers by giving rational explanations for everything that's happened and telling them that they'll remain institutionalized for the rest of their lives if they're unable to overcome their disorder. In a way, she's actually telling the truth, although we don't know it yet. The Black Clover Society was actually planning to kill them if Dr. Staple didn't successfully convince them that they're ordinary in a 3-day time span. But I'll get back to the Black Clover Society later in this video. Dr. Staple tells David that he has the symptoms of the supposed superhero disorder, but lacks some kind of anchoring incident that made him realize that he was a superhero, which is funny because the anchoring incident he thinks of is literally him drowning like an anchor. One of the main talking points that Dr. Staple uses to try to convince them that they're ordinary is that if superheroes do exist, then why would there only be the 3 of them? This is Dr. Staple counting on the fact that her Black Clover Society will always be successful in suppressing any supers from the public eye. David and Patricia appear to have their faith in their own powers shaken. Elijah doesn't respond because he's pretending to be a vegetable, but he knows that Dr. Staple is lying to them. All the talk of comic books sends Casey to the comic book store to do some of her own research, and the store is owned by none other than the comic book store clerk from Unbreakable. It seems that his suspicions of pervs in the back of the store hasn't changed either, when he yells out to Joseph, "You better not be one of those Hello Kitty pervs."
You better not be jacking off to the Japanese comics, I swear to God.
In the background, there's a comic titled Strange Happenings, which is possibly a nod to M. Night's 2008 film, The Happening. And as Joseph leaves the store, he notices a comic book called Whisper Man, which has been made specifically for the movie. The artist has a YouTube channel where he calls the character a puppet master of sorts, which reminds me of Dr. Staple's attempt to manipulate the heroes into thinking that they're ordinary. Shortly after, Joseph does some research on Kevin Crumb, and the author of one of the articles is Matthew Shapiro, one of the guys who emailed Dr. Fletcher in Split. When Mr. Glass looks at Kevin's file, if you pause, you can discover that Kevin's mother also had DID. It says, mother unfit for child custody. Mother's mental illness, DID, may have a profound effect on her child's development, including an increased risk of the child's developing the same disorder. So when his father was on Eastrail 177, he was seeking help for his wife at the time, not his son. Just as the mirror reflection shots are used to introduce villains in Unbreakable and Split, similar shots are used in Glass to show that something is not right. David sits on the floor of his cell, and his reflection is distorted by the curved wall. It is shortly after this that we discover Elijah was faking his sedation, and he has the ability to sneak out of his room, where he discovers the magazine advertising the opening of Osaka Tower. Just as the previous movies had subtle references to the Fantastic Four and Teen Titans, the headline of this article calls Osaka Tower a true marvel. Also, in a look-in at the Osaka Tower article, I saw the photography was done by Dave Kellum, an art department coordinator on Glass. Elijah tells the Beast that his plan is to attack the tower on its opening date, December 7th, which is Pearl Harbor Day, another major American disaster. More importantly, that's also my birthday, so put that down in your calendar right now. Right now. Then we get a glimpse into Elijah's past when he sneaks onto a carnival ride and tries to protect himself using stuffed animals. But again, it works really well here because the Beast ends up protecting him from the orderlies and the police as they break out of the hospital. So it's kind of as if he's been protected by animals every step of the way. It's also interesting to note that his plan on the carnival ride backfires and he ends up breaking his shoulder, just as the Beast turns on him at the end of Glass and breaks his shoulder, an injury he would never overcome. After Elijah discovers the powers of the Beast, he formulates his plan to have the Beast Beast battle David in front of the world. I think it's important to note that it was never Mr. Glass's real intention to go to the tower. All he really needed to do was convince the Beast to break them out so he could stream it using the cameras. And for anyone who felt that David Dunn's part in all of this was a little underwhelming, let's not forget that it was most likely Dunn's security company who provided all the cameras to the institution in the first place. Part of Elijah's plan was to change out the lens of the machine that he used for his surgery, then get himself caught lollygagging around on camera so that the doctor moves up the date of his operation. This is important because it allows the orderly, Daryl, to let his guard down around Elijah, giving him the opportunity to slit his throat with the broken shard of glass. And just as Elijah's broken glass cane represented his injuries in Unbreakable, the broken picture frames foreshadow his eventual demise in Glass. All three characters have their broken glass moment. At the end of the second act, there are a couple more clever uses of shots that use mirror reflections to tell us something. The first is Dr. Staple getting out of her car and heading into Ravenhill Memorial, which we see through her side mirror. These mirrors always come with a disclaimer. Objects in mirror are closer than they appear. Well, Dr. Staple is not just a psychiatrist as she appears to be, but she's actually part of this secret organization. Our earlier mirror shots of David and the Horde are distorted by curved mirrors, but when Elijah finally meets the Beast, he first sees the transformation through the reflection of a glass cabinet. And there's no distortion here, which tells us that things are going to be essentially as they should be, with the impending clash of good versus evil. Then Dr. Staple realizes that Elijah has broken out, and she sees the news report on TV about the opening of Osaka Tower, and thinks Mr. Glass is going to sabotage it. Also, the reporter is the same guy who reports on the missing girls in Split, and on the news ticker at the bottom, there's a report about cryptocurrency. Krypton is the name of Superman's home planet, and Superman is referenced several times throughout Glass. Shortly after, the final battle begins, and Dr. Staple curiously tells someone to make sure to keep patients and staff away from the south side windows. This is because she knows that David, Elijah, and Kevin's powers are real, and it's her duty to make sure nobody finds out about them. So that brings us back to this whole Black Clover Society. Who are they? Where did they come from? Why do they have these matching tattoos? And what do they have to do with Split and Unbreakable? All of the answers to these questions are coming up. At the end of the confrontation, a mysterious group of SWAT members, all sharing a wrist tattoo of a black 3-leaf clover, shows up to kill David and the Beast. Dr. Staple is revealed to be part of the society. She explains that they're a group that's been around for 10,000 years to keep superheroes out of the public eye because it's not fair to the rest of society to have gods walking among us. Dr. Staple's mission the entire time was to get them to believe that their powers weren't real, so they can go on living ordinary lives. She was given 3 days to do so, but if she failed, the alternative was some kind of brain surgery or death. In Split, we are shown how the organization's manipulation of society has worked. Society sees the Horde's dissociative identity disorder as a problem, a mental illness that needs to be cured. Dr. Fletcher's thesis to the medical community is that maybe those with those conditions are actually extraordinarily gifted.
Well, we look at people who've been shattered and different as less than. What if they're more than us?
But Dr. Fletcher is largely rejected by her peers, and it's because of the Black Clover Society that's been working for 10,000 years to condition us to see this as a mental illness. That's exactly what Dr. Staple does in Glass. She rounds up 3 of the most extraordinary supers in Philadelphia and tries to convince them that something is wrong with them, and that they need treatment. That's why she wants Casey to get Kevin to hold on to the light, because she is aware of the power that someone with DID is capable of. The existence of this group also explains a question brought up way back when Elijah and David have their first meeting in Unbreakable.
I believe comics are our last link to an ancient way of passing on history. The Egyptians drew on walls. Countries all over the world still pass on knowledge through pictorial forms.
Remember when Dr. Staple is meeting with Joseph, Casey, and Elijah's mother and tries to convince them that comics are nothing more than fantasy? She even brings up comic book conventions to try to invalidate them. The only time she gets frustrated is when they try to link their situation to what they've seen in comic books. The Clover Society is there to ensure that these stories exist through pictures as seemingly fictional stories, but nothing more.
I believe comics are a form of history that someone somewhere felt or experienced. Then, of course, those experiences and that history got chewed up in the commercial machine, got jazzed up, made titillating cartoon for the sale rack.
In Glass, the someone somewhere is Elijah referring to his mother, Joseph, and Casey. Only this time, instead of distributing comics to be chewed up in the commercial machine, they have actual video evidence of the existence of these powers. Dr. Staple also mentions that when one super appears, another is likely to appear opposite of him, and it just leads to conflict, which is why she feels that the Clover Society needs to appear to pacify them.
If there is someone like me in the world, and I am at one end of the spectrum, couldn't there be someone else, the opposite of me at the other end? Someone who doesn't get sick, who doesn't get hurt like the rest of us. And he probably doesn't even know it.
Okay, but why the black clover tattoos? That seems kind of random. Well, maybe not. We can look at it from the secret organization's perspective and from a filmmaking perspective. First, from a filmmaking perspective. The fact that David, Elijah, and the Horde's journey as superpowered humans ends with the tattoo of these clovers kind of brings the trilogy full circle. Let's go way back to when we're introduced to David in Unbreakable. A woman appears asking him if he's alone, and she takes the spot next to him on the train. He notices a tattoo on her abdomen, which appears to be a rose, but we only see the bottom of the stem because this is the very root of David's story. When we see the secret society's clover tattoos at the very end of David's story, we're seeing the top of the plant, so it's almost as if we've come all the way around. But then, why not use a rose tattoo for the society as well? The clover does a better job of representing their values. They essentially want to purge the world of anyone who has these rare special powers. A 4-leaf clover is considered a rare and lucky find, much like how a superhero is a rare, incredible standout in our society. But the black clover people don't want that. They want everyone to be a 3-leaf clover, and that's why it was chosen as the symbol of their organization. Finally, there was one other minute detail that I felt really brought the series to a nice conclusion. Mr. Glass famously gets his supervillain name from the kids that made fun of his condition, osteogenesis imperfecta.
They called me Mr. Glass.
Elijah's mother lives across from a playground. We see this in a flashback during Unbreakable. At the end of Glass, before the email comes from Elijah containing the footage of the final battle, you can hear the sounds of children playing outside. How fitting that the very playground that the kids poked fun of Elijah at, part of what put the villain idea in his head in the first place, gave him his awakening as a supervillain, can be heard again, just before Elijah's mother puts out that video to help all the heroes and villains across the world have their realization and awakening. When David first accepts his newfound powers in Unbreakable, Elijah tells him to go where there are people, and he goes to the train station. That's exactly what Mrs. Price, Joseph, and Casey do when they unveil the existence of these comic book heroes to the world. This has been the ultimate compilation of things you missed in the Eastrail 177 trilogy. Click the video on the left if you want to hear the ultimate compilation of things you missed in its Chapter 1. And remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring that death bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next one, assuming we both survive.